Welcome to Why Not Read Alpha Flight with Chris and Tom, a podcast where we take your favorite series seriously. I'm Chris Baker.
And I'm Tom Flynn, and welcome to episode 12, where absolutely nothing makes sense.
We only have 2 issues this episode, but both are double-sized and done by entirely different creative teams than Alpha Flight proper, and it feels so weird. Did you pick that up while reading these, Tom?
It's very jarring. Radically different styles from each other as well, let alone distinct from John Byrne's and Andy Yankees' Alpha Flight, like visually. It was uncomfortable. And when we get to the second thing we're going to talk about, that art style does not do, I think, great things for our heroes.
You know, it felt like seeing your friend around their other friends and they look like somebody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because instead of our crew of Byrne and Yankees doing everything on this, it's a whole bunch of people. Anyway, everything looks weird and it sounds kind of weird and not inherently bad weird. It's actually better than I expected. It's just not direct from God Byrne's pencil. But Louise Simonson, always worth reading, and Joe Duffy, no slouch.
So with that said, let's get into it. First up is Marvel Team Up Annual number 7.
Marvel Team Up, a mainstay of the Bronze Age. If Marvel 2-in-1 was secretly the Thing and His Amazing Friends, then Marvel Team Up is the original Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends book. Like, literally. The book ran from 1972 to 1986, and the cartoon started in 1981. This book teams up Spider-Man with anyone the Marvel editorial bullpen had lying around because kids have and will always love Spider-Man.
Of the 150 issues of this title, Spider-Man does not star in 11 of them. Of those, 10 star either the Human Torch or the Hulk, and 1 stars Aunt May.
I kind of want to read the Aunt May issue now. I mean, you know this, Tom, but listeners, you don't. I once made an Aunt May face patch because there was no one around to tell me that it was a bad idea. So, yeah, it's the old Aunt May. She looks like the desiccated corpse of Peter Cushing. It's perfect.
Yeah, for clarity's sake, usually he texts me with these ideas before he makes a patch. This one, he just texted me the final product. It was haunting.
There's a Mary Jane one, too, based on her first appearance. Anyway.
But this isn't an Aunt May podcast. Though that could be interesting. It's an Alpha Flight podcast.
We might need to cut that out because I just squeed a little too hard, but you're right. That would be fantastic. Just a deep, long dive into Aunt May.
I really wish that you would learn that when you say we should probably cut that out, it almost guarantees that I'll keep it in, just out of spite.
Well, sorry, listeners. I'll try to keep that under control. So, Marvel Team Up Annual number 7, titled The Collected Spider-Man, published Halloween 1984. Written by Louise Simonson, penciled by Paul Neary, inked by Dan De La Rosa, lettered by Joe Rosen, colored by Christy Scheel, edited by Danny Fingeroth and Jim Shooter as editor-in-chief. Continuity note: this seems to take place prior to the events of our last episode in Alpha Flight number 14 through 16. So this is somewhere between Alpha Flight number 12 and number 14.
The cover features Spider-Man in his black symbiote costume. I don't believe that we know it's a symbiote at this point in time in its history because I'm not an expert on Spider-Man.
Well, it crawls off him, so he knows it's a goo.
Well, right, it's a goo, but we don't know that's like the symbiote as the symbiote becomes.
Yeah, and he expressly says it seems to be on my side and working with me. So I don't think this is pre-symbiote.
So Spider-Man swinging across the cover, shooting web at a massive magenta cobra looking snake that has Alpha Flight, most of Alpha Flight, North Star, Aurora, Marrina, Sasquatch, and Puck wrapped in its coils, with a gentleman with a cape and an orange costume playing a flute flying on a magic carpet.
It is batshit.
It is unhinged. It's actually quite... I don't, if I saw this in the newsstand, I wouldn't know what to make of it. I'll also say that the coloring is overall pretty solid, except Marrina. Marrina's costume and skin and hair are all pretty much the same color with very little shading. She almost looks like an afterthought in this, which is kind of amusing. Well, but it's also kind of amusing because her involvement in this is what kind of gets all the action going.
Well, you mentioned the coloring, and I actually had just looked up the colorist here because I had read through the issue, and it's a weird coloring thing going on throughout it. But you mentioned the magenta snake. The snake isn't magenta. The snake is clearly like this brown green in it's a snake color in the book. Why is it magenta on the cover? You know what? We can derail on this for a while. Let's get into the meat of this.
In this issue, Marrina is collected, meaning kidnapped, by longtime Marvel alien weirdo, the Collector, aka Tenelier Tivan. You MCU fans will remember him as Benicio del Toro. I mean, that's one way of putting it. You could remember him as being played by Benicio. No, actually, I like this. In my head canon, Benicio del Toro is in fact the Collector. And you know what? He did a great job because now I think that Benicio del Toro actually was the Collector.
Well,
so
now the Collector is brothers with the Grandmaster, who was Jeff Goldblum in Thor Ragnarok. So does that mean like
yes,
Jeff Goldblum is also just the Grandmaster?
You tell me how that isn't the case.
Well, for those particular eternal beings of the Marvel Universe, they pick the perfect weirdos to come in and just channel it. So,
yes, channel it. That's what they were doing. They were just literally they rolled up to set, got costume and makeup done, and just sort of hung out for a while. Like, come on.
Well, Mr. of the Bull, I'll say you did a pretty good job of being the right kind of weirdo in that role.
I can't believe you just said that, but okay. Moving on, the Collector's deal is that he flies around in a spaceship and collects things. Not just things, but also living creatures that are unique or weird, some sentient, some not. He detected a Plutix on Earth, and those are apparently quite rare since the Plutix Empire's heyday was millennia ago. And since he was in the galactic neighborhood, he grabs Spider-Man because that's the kind of thing he does.
Oh, but the way he grabs them is wow. So over the centuries of collecting things, the Collector has an astounding arsenal of anything the writer can think up at his disposal. And part of the fun of reading this book is the bits of details we get about each item, but there are a lot of them. So we're going to focus on the important weird stuff that the Collector brings into this story. Trust me, there's a bunch more that we're leaving out.
Through a time travel adventure, the Collector is in possession of the famous genie in the lamp of Alibaba. So all he does is rub the lamp and tell the genie what to do. Apparently there's not a 3-wish limit.
Maybe wish for more wishes, or maybe he is literally using 2 of his wishes for Marrina and Spider-Man because he's an alien weirdo with weird motivations. We don't know.
Yeah, usually that more wishes loophole is pretty well covered.
I don't know. Maybe he's got a bunch of weird shit like this. 3 wishes is nothing to him. It's just like, oh, I got $20. Cool.
Well, maybe his last wish is always for another genie.
Oh,
that'd be an interesting skirt around, wouldn't it? Like, now you're done, but I want another lamp. And keep it going that way.
Well, the Collector always refers to it as the Djinn, D-J-I-N-N, not the genie. So props to Louise Simonson. I love when comics writers teach kids stuff without ever having to teach them anything.
And even though we didn't learn anything from it, having referred to it as the genie several times now. The Djinn appears as
that was for the reader's sake, or for the listener's sake. You're welcome, listeners. I'm going to keep cutting Tom off here for a bit. Go ahead.
It's fine. I did it to you last episode. The Djinn appears as a 4-headed figure coming out of green smoke, each head having a very, very different look. They all speak a different section of the sentence the Djinn is saying, seeming to operate as one mind. Having been directed to grab Spider-Man, that's literally what he does. He just teleports to where Spider-Man is and snatches him out of the air like a fastball.
I do love this black costume look for him, and I wish that it hadn't been handed off to Venom and become the Venom costume, because it's a really cool look, and I didn't like it once it was bulked up into the Venom character that we came to know. I like the slim, sleek Spider-Man. But, that said, I do own a ratty 20-year-old long-sleeve t-shirt with this design on it.
You still have that thing?
You don't get rich by throwing things away, Tom.
That's exactly how you get rich. Or at least it's one of the ways. What are you talking... You're not rich. What are you talking about? What's happening here?
I'm rich in spirit, bruv.
Oh, for fuck's sakes.
So Spider-Man is placed inside an enormous clam called the Pearl of Great Price, which is never explained. And then the Djinn does the same port and grab on Marrina, who is fortunately wearing her brooch. And she sends out the call to the rest of Alpha Flight. The Collector pulls out a chimelian flute that allows him to control an animal named Snake Eyes, which is a Xanthian boulder crusher, the aforementioned enormous-ass snake from the cover, whose hypnotic gaze will place anyone in sight into a deep slumber.
A quick note on the brooch. Marrina reflects on the fact that she wasn't wearing it when JMH sent out the call.
is the call. That's my favorite construction so far.
Yeah, that one almost broke my tongue. But she very much regrets her not being in possession of it, because that means she wasn't able to link up. She wasn't there to help. Maybe if she had been there, that would have helped tip things in their favor, and Guardian would not have died. So she's starting this issue with a lot of pathos, a lot of regret. It's interesting. It really kind of layers on top of what we saw at the end of the issues we covered last episode, where she's pretty shook. She doesn't really know where or what she is in this world. And yeah, it was a really well done bit of characterization that frankly Simonson didn't need to do in this, because this is not Alpha Flight proper, but it went in there, and it does a great job of actually advancing and building Marrina's character.
Louise Simonson is great. I have enjoyed every book I've ever read by Louise Simonson, and will check out anything that she's been involved in. There, I said it. I am a Simonson stan. Both Simonsons.
You just want to be adopted by them.
Oh, and also, to loop back to the brooch one more time, we didn't want to do the Bob Barker bit one more time, so this time what I'm thinking is, you all just have to imagine it's Krusty the Clown smoking the cigarette and looking dejected, and just looking at the camera and saying, "Chip your goddamn superheroes, people!" Okay. We don't need to keep that one.
No, we are absolutely keeping that one. But I did not see that coming. Circling back to Snake Eyes, the Collector avoids being hypnotized and put into a deep slumber by calling on the help of a mohawk monkey-looking creature named See No Evil, who clamps his hands over the Collector's eyes to protect him. See No Evil is part of a trio of monkeys. Obviously must be, hear and speak, being the other ones. I don't know what these things are. It's weird.
It's such a multi-layered plan. You've got the magic snake, and you've got the magic flute, and you've got these magic weird monkey.
Like, which came first? Did you already have the monkeys and you got the snake, or you got the snake and saw a drawback and therefore got the monkeys? Like,
I think it's just to show that he has a bunch of cool stuff, and he's like the only one who knows how to operate it.
You know what? It's the Collector. It's Benicio del Toro. I could totally see in the mantle of one of Benicio del Toro's houses 3 statues of 3 monkeys doing the see no, hear no, speak no, the sort of thing. I want that to be true. I need that to be true.
I have several sets of those because my family gets me monkey things. That's the default thing. Oh, you find some cool little variation on they have names. You know what? We're a little off in the weeds.
We have gone a little bit far afield. The Collector uses a flute, some musical instrument, to control Snake Eyes. And once Marrina, the Djinn, and the weird monkey things are all hypnotized and asleep, he stops playing it and assumes that everything's good to go. He can put folks into whatever containers that he needs to put them in. However, with everyone asleep, Spider-Man escapes from the Pearl of Great Price and goes one-on-one with the Collector.
Scene change to the rest of Alpha Flight, minus Shaman and Snowbird, flying off the coast of Canada.
Well, Aurora and Northstar are flying while holding secret agent superhero linebacker Dr. Walter Langowski and Puck, respectively. I'm going to note in the script, Chris has capitalized the first K in Walt's name, and I'm also going to note that I am never going to pronounce it.
So Walt, of course, lacks his sensible asbestos friction suit and is coming into battle in his underwear. And Aurora is carrying him under her arm instead of on her back. The penciler Paul Neary is not endearing me so far.
Are you sure that's underwear and not the He-Man loincloth?
Oh, he just, like you said, he shaves it and he weaves it, so it's just pure Sasquatch?
Yeah. All Sasquatch all the time. Anytime he's in any kind of orange moving forward, even if it's like a suit, you're just going to have to assume that it's him. It's all him. It's all Walt. Anyway, on the topic of Paul Neary, are you suggesting that the Marvel Team Up Annual isn't attracting the best talent?
Look, you best back off my friend Wheezy Simonson, bruv. I will cut you.
As established. This page is an info dump for the non-Alpha Flight readers. Names, powers, context, all very efficiently done as the twins squabble back and forth.
In one page, we get a sense of the twins' split after Northstar insulted Aurora for being kind of slutty, of Aurora's other personality, Jean-Marie, being a wet blanket, that Walt is the source of Northstar's jealousy, that Walt is increasingly not in control of Sasquatch, and that Aurora hints that Northstar isn't all man.
That is a lot to do in one page. Bravo, Louise. Simonson really has Alpha Flight's voices down. You can tell that she's been talking with Byrne and getting the book Bible breakdown of these characters in ways that
Mantlo
didn't in his use of them.
There's also a lot more to these characters now than there was when they were in like Marvel 2 and 1, you know? So Puck notes that Guardian's death didn't heal our petty squabbles, did it, Northstar? If anything, it made them worse, eh?
Back on the Collector's ship, Spider-Man is incapacitated by one of Collector's thingamabobs, while the Collector begins to freeze Marrina alongside her fellow Plodex samples. Now, these are all wildly different phenotypes of creatures, but all share the same yellow-green skin tone as Marrina. Remember, the Plodex bond with local life forms, so the descendants that come from the space eggs don't have a standard shape.
Whereupon Alpha Flight X-Factors their way through the ship's hull, and Tom, do you know why I say X-Factored their way through a wall?
I have absolutely no idea.
Okay, I realize I've said that before. So on the podcast, Jay and Miles explained the X-Men. They read through X-Factor just like we're doing here with Alpha Flight. And they noticed that early X-Factor, the '05 X-Men, literally never use a door to enter a building. They always burst through a wall. And ever since they pointed that out, whenever I see it in a comic, that's what I see in my head. X-Factor coming through.
Fair enough.
So, hail, hail, the gang's all here. Fisticuffs ensue.
The Collector deploys a bunch of gizmos, blah, blah, blah. I mean, the important bits are that Northstar intentionally goads Sasquatch into a rage to show Aurora she should come back to him.
Goddamn theater kids. And along that line, everybody sees Northstar do that. Puck sees it and comments on it. Spider-Man will comment on it. Everybody knows that's what Northstar is doing, and he's like not getting away with something and making Sasquatch look bad. It's a squabble. It's ridiculous.
Sasquatch takes a break from his usual practice of picking a fight with the big bad guy and goes for his second favorite activity, attempting to murder Northstar for being an annoying prat.
Oh man, can you imagine if in Alpha Flight number 24 for the second anniversary for the next character to die, if Sasquatch just picked up a fucking tree and pounded Northstar into the ground with it and killed him?
Pulled a Colossus, just like straight up punched him as hard as he could. Well, imagine Northstar traveling full speed at Sasquatch,
And he
Sasquatch
times it just right.
and punches him as hard as he can. That's a fine mist left behind. There's
Yes,
not a
and
lot
there's
there.
just nothing left. Oh my god! And then Walt's in a rage and Sasquatch, and then when he goes back to Walt and he's covered in Northstar, and I'm not saying Northstar's blood, I'm saying Northstar because he's a mist, and I could see Byrne doing that actually.
Man, what could have been?
No, there's even worse to come. So where were we?
Aurora gets put inside a dark box, and that is one of her mental triggers to go bye-bye for a bit and let her other persona, Jean-Marie, take over. It is really quite distressing to watch, actually.
It's some nice negative space art here. In fact, it looks suspiciously like John Byrne art from back in issue number 4.
Yeah, that was number 4.
Yes.
Reading Aurora trying to fight off her fear and knowing what's coming, and then all of a sudden her voice to change, like the lettering change, and she's asking a nun to let her out and that she won't misbehave again is woof.
It
That's
breaks your heart
rough.
a little bit. Yeah. You can see how this has been done many times before.
Yeah.
So I want to bag on Neary for just repeating a thing that worked so well for Byrne, but I have an idea. And at this point in Alpha Flight's publishing history, it is possible for a creator to literally read everything Alpha has ever done, or at least the Byrne stuff that matters. So we're getting some closely written motifs repeated, like this negative space mental break image, Sasquatch fighting the Hulk and the Thing and the Wendigo. It just feels like Alpha Flight is a little too wrapped up its own ass at the moment. There hasn't been enough time to make these repetitions feel earned, instead of feeling like it's Jim Shooter just screaming, God, what is it kids want these days? Is it crazy chicks? Is it incest twins? Giant furry orange wang? What do they want?
That's an interesting rant. I mean, I very much get what you're saying. I think at the same time, though, for something like this annual, and also within the context of Alpha Flight's history, I mean, Alpha Flight at this point has been around for what, a year, just over?
As the team book, but, they've been threaded through fairly well.
But for Simonson to kind of use a lot of these beats from the first year of its existence as a way of getting at the characters. I mean, this annual could be someone's introduction to Alpha Flight. It's that they suddenly are interested and start to work back through. And so I understand what you're saying. I agree. I don't think it's fully earned yet. However, within the context of this being something so odd, their inclusion in this is so strange in its own way. I don't hate it. I think it's effective storytelling here.
Well, while Sasquatch is trying to murder Northstar, again. Puck actually tries to get Marrina out of her rapidly freezing tank. So, good job, Puck. You seem to be the de facto field leader. Puck catches some debris to break the tank and says, "And I considered my stint as catcher for the Flying Zambinis a waste of time."
Okay, Louise, you're laying it on a little thick. Now that's a motif that is happening in every issue where Puck has to mention something that he did in his past that directly informs his abilities in the present. And I mean, cool and all, but it's getting.
It pops up a couple times in this issue and in the next one that we're going to cover. So it seems very much that Byrne told anybody else touching him, this is what Puck does. Like just after this, as he picks up Marrina, he says, "Just froze his walrus toes, eh? And is lively. Luckily, I'm lively enough for two, sweet thing. Oops, watch out for rampaging giant snakes. Reminds me of that time I played chicken with the Orient Express."
I mean, it's just, what are you doing?
And since this is before the adventure from last episode, this is the first time he's seen and talked to her since she tried to kill him. So, like, he shows up, saves her life, and then wisecracks his way through it and talks about bullshit wild adventures. Like, this is Puck being the rock-solid, reliable guy that the team needs in this time of transition because they don't even have a field leader. Nobody discussed before they X-Factored in, all right, who's calling the shots? Who's in charge here? It was just, no, fuck it. We're going in. Here we go.
I also have the suspicion that lots of people have tried to kill Puck over the years that he's then had to make nice with afterwards. So, I think he's well practiced at this particular approach.
That's an excellent no prize, Tom. I award you one no prize.
At this point, Spider-Man has freed the giant hypnosnake and smashed the Collector's fancy flute that controlled it.
This is pretty much what just happened on the Master's big goddamn submarine. Big goddamn fish submarine.
It's exactly that. Yes.
So I was going through this, Tom, and I have to have a rant here about the Master because he's not going to come up for a little while. Why does the Master's helmet have a big goddamn V on it? I opened up my tablet and it's sitting there, it's glowing, it's looking at me, and it's the Master with a big V, and I'm like, oh, you're the Vaster. What the fuck are you? Why don't you have a big M on your helmet?
Well, you know why there's not a big M.
No, that's literally what I'm upset about, Tom.
Okay. Imagine a helmet with a big M on it. Who does that look like?
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. Then he'd look like Magneto. So that was a non-starter. I really am amazed at how much you're obsessed with this helmet. Every time we see the Master,
it's the only thing that matters about him. And I hate that you are right about this.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for. Spider-Man frees Jean Marie from her dark box prison while the frozen Plodex collection thaws and reanimates. Northstar tries to whine that Aurora's lover is smashing up the ship when he realizes she is no longer Aurora and tells Spider-Man to hand her over so he can help her.
And this is the best part of the book. As Snake Eyes moves towards Puck and Marrina, Spider-Man throws Jean Marie to Northstar and says,
"You want her? Take her! You people all belong in a loony bin. We're collected by an obsessed alien surrounded by monsters, and does it bother you? No! Can't let a little thing like the ship being torn apart distract from the full-time soap opera. Sasquatch turns into a raging psychotic, Aurora turns into somebody else, and you, Northstar old pal, haven't behaved rationally from the beginning. The only, and I use the word advisedly, member of your contingent are monster bait unless I help them. Though, if it turns out they're like the rest of you, they may not be worth saving."
Jeez, tell us how you really feel, Pete.
I think you mean Louise. This definitely reads like Louise hitting the Alpha Flight nail on the head and maybe, just maybe, tweaking her friend John Byrne.
That's really what came across to me as well, that she's saying, John, you're laying it on pretty damn thick here. It's pretty hard for the rest of us to interact with this seriously because look at this. This is a mess. What am I supposed to do with this team, Tom?
Turn off as the world turns, John, and maybe read a book before you write the next arc.
Now, that said, where's the lie? They all acted exactly in character. They just needed someone from the outside to point that out, and that's what Spider-Man did.
And yeah, I have nothing to follow up with. Pete absolutely read them for filth, and
filth? No, that's too much. Is too much.
Fine. He did not read them for filth. He did, however, point out just how absurdly dysfunctional this quote-unquote team happens to be.
And Spider-Man knows everybody. When Spider-Man is saying, you all are a mess, you need to get your shit together. When Peter Parker is telling you that you're a mess and you need to get your shit together.
Peter, I've dropped out of grad school. Aunt May won't talk to me. I'm dating the Black Cat, who's actually more interested in me as Spider-Man than as Peter. Like, this is where Peter Parker is in this moment. At the beginning of the issue, he's told that the Bugle's not interested in Spider-Man pictures anymore. Peter, my life is a living hell. Parker is telling you that your shit completely out of whack. That's rough.
Oh, man. Thank you, Louise. This has been so much fun. Anyway, we're not even done. Sasquatch does a good job wrestling the big goddamn snake, but smashes the hell out of the ship and tosses it through the hole because he's still in a rage. So now there's a Xanthian boulder crusher on the loose in the Atlantic Ocean.
I wonder if we'll see it again.
Realizing that he has no means of escape and the Plodex are rapidly melting, the Collector tells the heroes of a grave threat to the universe. Asterisk. And he is assembling the Plodex as a last-ditch effort to repopulate the universe should the threat come to pass.
So the heroes help prepare the Collector's ship in, like, record time and tell him to take himself and his patchouli stink out of their planet.
Asterisk. So the threat that's happening, that he talked about, was happening over in Thor, where Surtur is forging his sword in preparation for Ragnarok, coincidentally written and drawn by Louise Simonson's husband, Walt.
And folks, if you haven't read Simonson's Thor, which I also haven't, I'm being told that you and I should go do it now.
Yeah. I read 4 of those collected trade paperbacks to my youngest when she was about 3 through 5, and she really liked the big doom sound effects. And, of course, Throg.
Of course. Everyone loves Throg.
The Saga of Throg is an intense story of courage, kings, princesses' bravery, and a homeless man playing a flute to alligators in the New York City sewers. Everyone should read it.
That doesn't sound terribly dissimilar from this issue, I have to say.
Yeah, I was realizing that too. There's a lute controlling dangerous reptiles. Oh, damn.
Like, that's just where the Simonsons were at. Can you imagine them, like, at home in their apartment in New York, and it turns out that they just have, like, every kind of reptile you can imagine that they like to play music for?
Yeah, there we go. If somebody wants to do a podcast of Simonson v. Simonson and looking for these coincidences through their work, I would listen to every episode you'd put together.
And and if you do that, I need you to do it kind of serial style, like make it sound like a true crime kind of podcast, like some serious, like 48 hours investigative reporting going on there. That'd be pretty great. And if you want to do that, please get in touch. I would be happy to help you make that happen.
So as the heroes congratulate each other for preventing conquering monsters from invading Earth, Marrina says, "Monsters, horrors, that is what my people are, what I am. Perhaps I should have gone off in that ship with them. Someday I may prove just as deadly. Farewell. For now, I must be alone." And in what is rapidly becoming a cliche, say it with me, Marrina swims away.
Marrina's stories seem to end like Hulk stories, where the green character just runs away instead of dealing with the aftermath or, feelings.
One thing I feel like we're missing out due to our poor voice work, Tom, is that Marrina grew up in Newfoundland, which means that nobody understood what she actually said before she swam away. And I almost want to go like on Fiverr or something and find an authentic Newfie woman to like just record bits of dialogue for us to get across the incomprehensibility of this fish lady that speaks like a Newfoundland.
Maybe I should just take audio from Snatch, like Brad Pitt's audio, and just cut that in for any time Marrina speaks.
Yeah. It's like that. It's just a bit more North American, but yeah, that's pretty much the same thing we're going for here.
Yeah, I mean, as far as they're concerned, she said, "Bye, guys. This was so much fun. So good to see you. I've got some things I have to handle, but I'll totally check in later. See I'm wearing my brooch, and she looks great." And they can't read her face because of the fish eyes.
They're not looking at her in horror because they think she's a monster. They just don't have any idea what she just said and don't know what expression to get across. Oh, everything makes so much more sense. All in all, this was a really fun issue. Like for all of our complaints and whatnot, this was fun, and that's all on Louise Simonson. The art is a bit below fine for me, except for those cribbed negative space panels. The backgrounds were particularly weird. There were odd coloring choices. It was stuff going on.
I mean, it's an annual. That statement kind of stands on its own. I guess the one thing I would also add on to the art is Aurora's chest is far more prominent here than it has ever been with any of Byrne's drawing. And This is an issue that has Black Cat in it, and Aurora's breasts stand out. So like that was an interesting choice.
Neri likes his jumblies apparently, because boy, it was. I didn't even expect to talk about it, but boy, yeah, I had texted Tom. I was like, Tom, is Aurora's bust like particularly busting through on this one? Because every time I see her, I'm like, wow.
I mean, every time Walt sees her, he goes, wow. So
Oh, stop. Oh, behave. Being an annual, this gives them more space for the story, and they used it well, but the continuity stuff is kind of weird. Like, whether this was before or after the last Alpha Flight story that just finished, I would expect the I'm a monster to them motif to be repeated in the main book more strongly, or here more strongly, depending upon which one came last. I also wish that we had gotten some actual character development from Marrina, because she's been around for over a year now, and she is still practically a blank slate to us because she keeps getting presented with the same problem. Somebody wants her because of her being a Plodex, and she doesn't like the way that makes her feel. But each one of these stories ends in that same point. Like, we're not moving from point to point for her in character development.
And as you noted before, Puck saw exactly what North Star was doing, along with Spider-Man noticing it. In terms of team dynamics, that does give them something else to explore. This tension between North Star and Walt and Aurora are among them, and really North Star's willingness to completely detonate a mission just to get across, like just to try and get his sister back. But what does that even really mean? I mean, an apology might do a few things, but I don't really see
Well,
Jean
he
Paul being able
did.
to
That's
do
the
that.
thing. He's apologized. He's groveled. He's done everything, and now the same dynamic is kicking in on Aurora's end, where she is just like refusing to give in for the same. Yeah, they're 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 the same side of the same coin.
Theater kids.
So there's no sex, no death here. They technically achieved their goal of saving Marrina and kicking out the Collector, but they did team up with Spider-Man. So take a drink.
The Spider-Man stuff wrapped around the main story is pretty good. It's a good single issue to pick up and read and want to get to know more, which is obviously what annuals are kind of designed to do. They're supposed to be kind of announcements of where things stand and what the status quo is. And if you're interested, read back a few issues and pick up the next one. So yeah,
It's
works
usually
well.
a meaty story that somebody can pick up, and you can read it for a while when you're stuck in the car over the summer, that type of thing, and doesn't necessarily link up with continuity in a way that if it's your parent picked it up for you on a road trip in 1987, and threw it at you, you could read that in the car and not be too left out. So that's what annuals are for, the summer reading slump. But in regard to Alpha Flight's inclusion, Simonson slipped behind the wheel. She knew just how to make this team work. I was pleased with how she nailed their voices from the get-go, and I would have liked to see more of Louise Simonson handling them.
Chris, what if Louise Simonson took over Alpha Flight instead of Bill Mantlo?
You make me sad. I'm going to be sad all day.
Remember, carbs aren't love.
Carbs aren't love. But then again, Louise didn't seem to really like Alpha Flight much, so I don't know. Based on what I've read of Mantlo, he didn't like them much either. So I guess it couldn't possibly have been any worse. And knowing Louise's skills, boy, you make me sad, Tom.
And now for something completely different. The Saga of Crystar, Crystal Warrior number 11, cover date February 1985. Script and plot by Joe Duffy, art by Ricardo Villamonte, lettered by Janice Chung, colored by Andy Yankus. Hi, Andy. Missed you. Edited by Ralph Macchio, that Ralph Macchio, with Jim Shooter as editor-in-chief.
One thing I like about reading the credits out loud for this show is that it has really helped carve some mental paths about creators and paying attention to comics in a very different way than I did as a kid. And as I started reading the names in the credits, I saw the D in Joe Duffy and thought to myself, I bet Janice Chung lettered this. There's like an angling to it that makes the R's and the D's and the P's a bit muddy, if you ask me. But if you had asked me 5 months ago, before we started this podcast, if I had any opinions about comic book letterers, I would have given you the Tucker Carlson quizzical dog face. But here we are.
So this is the last issue of the Saga of Crystar, Crystal Warrior limited series, and we are treated to a double-sized issue of What in the Ever Fuck. There have been 10 issues before this that establish what's going on, and of all Marvel properties to choose from, Alpha Flight are brought in for the last half of the final issue.
Hey, but they're brought in a cool way, at least.
Sure. Here's what you need to know. And if I know it, now you have to know it too. The Saga of Crystar, Crystal Warrior, is an 11-issue series published by Marvel from 1983 to 84. Much like Rom's Space Knight, around the same time too, this series was intended to sell a line of toys, but unlike Rom, this is a wholly Marvel-owned IP. They worked up the toys themselves, which might explain a few things, and published the book with the intention of selling the rights to a toy seller in the future. Yeah, how'd that go? So a crass commercial grab at kids, but at least an in-house one instead of mercenary writing for hire like G.I. Joe.
While the Saga of Crystar, Crystal Warrior is a very minor element in the Marvel Universe, there are a couple of important cultural points you should be aware of. First, much like a pimp named Slickback from the Boondocks cartoon, the book's name is The Saga of Crystar, Crystal Warrior, and it infuriates me whenever I try to look it up in my database because I never remember the Saga of part, and I end up with the far superior Brian K. Vaughan book.
You know what? I think that statement stands for itself. Every Boondocks reference, or every Boondocks anything, is delightful. Also, I just read that part of the script as you were reading it, and there's a Brian K. Vaughan version of this.
No, not version of this. It's a book called Saga. It's
Oh, I'm sorry. It's because you missed the saga of the and the of.
But
yeah,
you know what? Hey, Brian K. Vaughan, I bet you can pick this up for about $3.50 from Marvel if you wanted to take a crack at it.
I would kill to read a Vaughan version of this. It would actually be pretty great. And yeah, Saga is fantastic.
So second, at last year's San Diego Comic-Con, the Marvel Legends figure line unveiled a Crystar figure, so somebody must have cared about this series.
Third point, Crystar and his people were also featured in a Robot Chicken episode where it was discovered the crystal they were made of is actually meth. Which is absolutely the best bit saved for last. Most of you are probably aware of Glenn Danzig's eponymous debut album 1988, you know, the one with Mother on it. The cover shows a white monster skull on a black background. You've seen this album cover.
Danzig stole the skull from the cover of the Saga of Crystar, Crystal Warrior number 8. I looked up both images, and I looked for a way to debunk this, but no, it's the same damn skull. And so after I was looking at this, I told my wife this story this morning, and she immediately pulled up the images as well. And I saw her go through the same, negotiation process of not wanting to believe it. But no, it is definitely where Danzig got his Danzig/Samhain skull from.
If Crystar is metal enough to influence Glenn Danzig, there might be more here than meets the eye.
Well, it wasn't important enough for Marvel to include it in the Alpha Flight Omnibus, so my expectations are still pretty low.
I like how I'm still in the negotiation process by even saying that there's something to Crystar, because my god. Okay. The cover is very dramatic. The page is dominated by two figures back to back. One is apparently made of crystal, with a sword of the same material. The other is red and rocky and seems to have volcano vents all over his head. So, good guy and bad guy in the last issue of the series. Crystar and Moltar, they're brothers, fighting over the kingdom on behalf of the concepts of order and chaos. You can guess which is which. I hate everything about what I've just been saying for the last 20 seconds. My god.
And yet, even though Order and Chaos are introduced, the Marvel cosmic entities Master Order and Lord Chaos don't make an appearance. And that would have been a really good hook into the rest of Marvel for this title, because this Alpha Flight appearance is the only connection it has to the 616.
This is so poorly thought out. In the foreground, Puck is running resolutely forward. Snowbird is flying over his shoulder despite not appearing in the issue, and Shaman is doing his crisscross applesauce levitation pose, but his upper body seems to be singing to the opening of Bohemian Rhapsody or something. He really is giving it his all.
It's great. That's what I heard. Mama! Listeners, I'm not going to try to explain the plot of the Saga of Crystar, Crystal Warrior to you, nor am I going to even mention these poor doomed characters' names. It's not a bad book, but it isn't particularly good either. It's a much meatier Masters of the Universe ripoff. In fact, it seemed much like a heavier read than I would have expected a kid playing with a toy set to want to read. I am not sure who this book was aimed at. So we're going to flip pages till Alpha Flight shows up and see what this looks like from their perspective.
And it looks insane, I'm sure, from their perspective. Northstar, Shaman, and Puck are the only members of Alpha Flight on hand to fight a giant, ill-defined humanoid monster that appeared in the wilds of Canada. Shaman and Northstar are at a loss to explain it, while Puck casually tells them it's a chaos creature and gets cut off as he starts an old man Puck story of some past adventure.
Oh, this really is just the book Bible blurb on Puck. He has cryptic stories that hint at wild adventures, but importantly, he never proactively uses that information. He just uses his knowledge to make himself sound worldly and mysterious, you know?
He is drawn here, as in the other issue, as always, in his unitard and headgear. It really emphasizes the broadness of his face.
Yeah, it looked really broad and flat, but it's nice to see the disconnected mustache come back. Byrne tends to draw him with his headgear off a lot more. In both of these issues, he literally never has his headgear off. And you can see that he has clear, like, protectors around his ears that stick out. And in an earlier issue, I didn't point out the art bit because I assumed it was just an art error, but it looked like he had a really horrific cauliflower ear, which I would believe that Puck would have a really horrific cauliflower ear. And if he did, he would definitely have designated ear protection like a wrestler. And I think that's what they're going for, is an actual 4 points wrestler, not a pro wrestler headgear look.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, which also makes sense given his fighting style is heavy on the acrobatics, but also he's a grappler. Clearly, he's a grappler.
His job is to get punched from time to time.
So the shorthanded team brings down the monster, and Shaman reaches into his magic medicine bag, and instead of pulling out a bandage for Northstar, who got hit in the head, he pulls out a hand-sized crystal, with a human hand following behind it, reaching out of Shaman's medicine bag for said crystal.
And on the other side of the bag, we see a wizard-looking guy with a hand that matches the one we just saw rummaging in his robe's pocket, while a weird crystal woman is saying, "Daddy, just what is going on in there? You opened up some kind of space rift again, haven't you? Merely forgotten to clean out your pockets again, didn't you? Honestly, you could lose an entire dragon into that mess." So the wizard dad guy seems to kind of angrily, like, empty his pocket onto the floor, and out come the Alpha Flight heroes.
What was that accent you were going for?
Shut up. So I really loved the idea of Shaman reaching into his bag and, like, suddenly stroking hands with this wizard, and Shaman just getting an alarmed look because, like, the only thing he's ever supposed to touch in there is exactly what he's supposed to pull out of there, and someone is gently caressing his hand. Like, I don't think we've ever seen Shaman caught off guard, but that would definitely be a moment of Michael being like, "Yo, what the fuck?" And that's the best part of the issue, everybody.
Chris told me about this a few recordings back.
Oh yeah, weeks ago.
Did not know that we were going to be reading Crystar at the time, but here we are. And it's a fun idea.
Why?
But that it's used here is actually kind of disappointing.
Right. Yes, that's what it feels like. Yeah. Why we use this cool thing in this stupid book? But then again, you know, cool stuff comes out of this stupid book. Look at Danzig.
Yes. We are going to directly attribute Danzig to Crystar, Crystal Warrior.
Hey, he couldn't have made it without them.
Sorry, the saga of Crystar,
Warrior. Crystal Warrior.
Man. So as our heroes wonder where here is now, and I wonder why we're even doing this podcast, Puck excitedly says,
"Here is Crystallium, of course. That certainly explains why that chaos creature was around. There must be enough loose energy flying around here these days that it created a spatial rift." So Puck has apparently been here before, and he knew Crystar's father, the king, and thought him an honorable ruler. And just let me say, I hate that I had to say the word Crystallium. Crystallium? Ugh.
This adventure of Puck's is apparently never mentioned again. At least we get some payoff on the brass bishop eventually. I also just want to note, sometimes I swear Puck sounds like Elijah Snow from Planetary.
Ooh.
All this cool backstory, half of which he's probably forgotten. It's been around for entirely too long. Intersects with, Puck's stories suggest he intersects with every genre that Marvel touches, like sword and sorcery, the pulpy dime store kind of stuff. It's neat, but also feels like kind of underutilized. But anyway,
Puck could easily be a breakout star. You know what I mean?
He's filling the role that Wolverine was supposed to fill, and that role has a lot of potential in this style of comic, and so that kind of makes sense. But in the way that Elijah Snow's history in Planetary was used by Ellis and Cassaday to kind of go after all these different things and different types of comics to really great effect throughout that series, it does feel a little bit like a throwaway thing here just to create mystery for Puck, and that's not as interesting as it could be.
But then again, look at how less interesting Wolverine became as these things started getting fleshed out for him. So you know what? Maybe we should thank God for small favors. Ha! That wasn't a Puck joke.
Oh, Christ. I was going to say that's a reasonable point, and then you finished it with that comment.
So our heroes join their heroes, take a drink, Engage in a final battle with the forces of chaos and slay the evil magician avatar of chaos after Moltar turns on his allies and supports his brother as the wise ruler.
Shaman kills some dudes without really meaning to, so there, take another drink.
So our heroes are told they're welcome in Crystallium anytime, and we end with a full-page pinup of everybody from the issue and half the page screaming, "All hail Crystar, king of Crystallium!" And Puck is holding hands with a fellow short person in a unitard without his giant P on it. It was just, this page, Tom, it hurts.
Give him this. Alpha Flight undeniably won the fight, so there's no failure here today.
Yeah, no failure, no sex. Good job, guys. There was death and there was team ups, but that's comics, everybody. So on its own, the saga of Crystar, Crystal Warrior, is perfectly fine. It's fine. It's princes and kingdoms and magic, and it is not a world where superheroes make sense other than as gifted warriors. There's no stopping crime or helping kiddies type of thing. There was absolutely no goddamn reason for Alpha Flight to get pulled into this, and I cannot imagine that this was the idea of either Byrne or Joe Duffy. It feels like this was supposed to be somebody else, but for some reason it was changed last minute, which is why Alpha's involvement is just extra troops for the good guys, and there's no real reason for these to be those good guys. It was like a placeholder. Like it could have been the Great Lakes Avengers that showed up.
This is the superhero equivalent of doing a Japanese commercial in the 90s for a major Hollywood star.
You just assume that nobody's going to see it because it's in this bullshit book that
nobody's ever going to look at. But I mean, like, whose paycheck? Like, this isn't helping. this isn't helping anyone. This is just sort of like, okay. How many people were actually reading Crystar at this point? That it just and the way that annual was a nice way to introduce Alpha Flight to readers of Spider-Man.
Yeah, this was not that.
This was not even close to being anything useful like that. I have not read as much Alpha Flight as Chris. I will get there eventually, but I can definitively say that this is the worst issue of Alpha Flight.
The worst issue of Alpha Flight so far.
Damn it.
I recall as we were gearing up to start recording our first episode, I was reading way ahead in the series, and I actually made that Simpsons meme of this and sent it to you with the issue number that I can definitively say is the worst issue of Alpha Flight. And for the record, that is Alpha Flight number 127, just before Volume 1 enters its final arc. Here's a little preview. Shaman wears opera gloves, and I think it may have turned me off a lifelong interest in opera gloves. That brings us to this episode's featured patch from the Excelsior Embroidery Company. This week, I'm featuring the aforementioned Aunt May face patch to prove that I really did make one. But also, I'm featuring the Doom sound effect from the Walt Simonson run on Thor. I think they're pretty neat. Check it out.
You can find us on the web at www.thewhynotpod.com, as well as our main socials on Instagram, Tumblr, Reddit, and now Twitter. You can also email us at whynotehpod@gmail.com. That's whynotapod@gmail.com. Yes, it still makes me laugh. We're always happy to hear from you and try to answer your Alpha Flight questions. This episode of Why Not is recorded in Chicago, Illinois, and deep beneath stately Baker Manor in a fashionable neighborhood outside St. Louis, with cat noises, not so many this time, provided by a chonk named Teeny. It is produced by Tom Flynn with help from Chris Baker. New episodes are available every other week on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and your preferred podcatcher. If you like what you hear, please rate and review us on your podcast provider. Those are really important to helping fellow fans find our show.
Thank you for joining us on these silly guest adventures. Join us next time when Shaman and his daughter Elizabeth fight a scrambled egg monster, and we continue groping our way towards a post-JMH world for Alpha Flight.
See you then.